Hello and welcome to the first ever professional photo podcast. Time to make a brew, relax, turn up the volume as we bring you a fortnightly slice of everything you need to know from the world of professional photography. My name is Matty Graham, I'm contributing editor on the magazine, and joining me at the end of the line is the main man himself, Mr. Terry Hope, editor of Professional Photo. So, thanks for joining us, and what can you expect from the podcast? Well, we're aiming to bring you as much variety as possible, but for sure we'll be talking about the latest product news, answering your questions, speaking to the industry's leading players, and exploring everything that goes into making a professional picture in today's competitive industry. So Terry, are you hearing me loud and clear? And if so, how's your week going, and what have you been up to during lockdown?
Loud and clear, thank you, Matty, and yes, up to quite a lot is the answer to that. It's been, in my career, I'd say it's been the quite with beyond question the maddest 3 months I've ever experienced, and just the speed that everything happened. I mean, I'm sure, obviously, we're talking to a professional audience, and I'm sure everybody will understand exactly what I'm saying when I said how quickly everything kind of turned around. We'd just put out our pre-TPS special issue. I was looking forward to the show, and everything was kind of going well. We had a wedding special issue coming up and everything. And in the 4 weeks it took to put that together, obviously everything just went crazy. And I'm sure we all kind of emphasised with that how quickly everything changed. And yeah, we had to make some very quick decisions. We did get that issue out because it was all ready to go and ready to be printed. But obviously all the shops and so on were closing down. All the conventional routes to market were disappearing. And we had to make the call to do something quite dramatic very quickly. And as everybody knows, I'm sure, we decided to make the magazine digital only for a few issues, because that was really the only way we could respond to things. We had no shops to sell through, and distribution at that time again wasn't easy. So but then of course an online magazine is completely different to a printed magazine, and so
of course, yeah,
incredible amount of reinvention going on virtually overnight.
Excellent. Well, I mean, we've got some news about the issue later in the podcast, which is really positive and really encouraging. Well, for me, I mean, it's been another busy week. Obviously, alongside my commitments to the magazine, I'm a working pro as well. So, I mean, this week I've been working with a YouTube presenter who's just celebrated getting his silver play button from YouTube, no less, for hitting 100,000 subscribers. And it's automotive based, but this one was actually filming electric motorbikes, which was really fun. So it gave me a chance to experiment with some of my DJI Osmo action cameras. I'm sure you've seen them before, and sort of mounting them to the camera, to the bikes, so they give a really immersive experience to the viewer. A bit of drone work as well, so that's been quite fun. So yeah, another busy one. Next couple of days I'm off to Donington Park race circuit to do some more automotive filming, which should be good. But I absolutely echo what you say about the lockdown. It happened really quickly, didn't it? And took us all by surprise. I was actually due to fly out to the Faroe Islands the week after lockdown. This trip was, months and months in planning. And then, you could almost sense that, it was going to get cancelled, and, everyone was going into lockdown in different countries. And of course, Denmark shut their borders, which meant the Faroe Islands did as well. And the trip has been postponed, which is a real shame, but there's far more important things going on in the world. But before we go any further, we need to say a big thank you to Sennheiser, who have kindly supported the podcast. And in fact, we're recording the audio using Sennheiser gear. Right before me, as I speak now, is the Sennheiser Mach 4 true condenser microphone, which is an amazing bit of kit. It's built like an absolute tank and gives amazing sound quality. These things, they're made in Germany. They have a shock-mounted capsule. They're great for podcasts, and also I do a bit of music as well, so it's great for that. So thank you again, Sennheiser, for helping out with the podcast. It's much appreciated.
Yes, and I should also say that I'm listening to you at this very moment, Matty, through my HD25 Sennheiser headphones, which is a limited edition to celebrate 75 years of the company, and very well they're working as well too. So yeah, big thanks to Sennheiser for that.
Now, Terry, we can't start the news without talking about what is arguably the biggest launch in maybe the last 15 years. I am, of course, referring to the Canon Eos R5. So, a little bit of history. My first DSLR camera was the 350D nearly 20 years ago. All 8 megapixels of it. Fantastic camera. Went around the world 3 times with it, never missed a beat. In fact, it's still working to this day. And since then, I've owned virtually every Canon out there, 1DSs, 5Ds, currently using the 5D Mark IV, 6Ds, 7Ds, and although I use other brands too, I mean, looking around the office, there's Pentaxes and Sonys lying everywhere. My main workhorses for my commercial and video work are Canons. So these announcements are a really big deal, and if you missed the launch feed that Canon sent out yesterday, let's walk you through the headlines. So the EOS R5 is a professional camera, and it can be seen as the spiritual successor to the 5D4, I think. It's got 45 megapixels, up to 20 frames per second burst rate, which is, of course, the same as the Sony A9. And amazingly, it's got up to 8 stops of in-body image stabilisation. 8 stops. Amazing. Other specifications include over 5,000 selectable AF points, and amazingly, 8K raw video. What do you think of it, Terry?
It's incredible, isn't it? And obviously that was probably the headline launch yesterday, but there was so much else that came along with it as well. And Canon have been teasing us with this, haven't they? It's really interesting how they've done that. It's I think they faced a couple of challenges. First of all, these aren't normal times, and so it couldn't be a normal launch. So it's the first time I think anything this kind of size has been done online. Obviously, the whole world was invited to hear about it pretty much at the same time as a lot of us did in the media. I did get a bit of a heads up on it a few days before, but we had, of course, had a lot of the information coming through already, and so I think we'd had a chance to quite get our heads around it, and it didn't disappoint, that's for sure. Obviously, I'm sure you and I both, it's frustrating in that we, a normal launch, you would get to pick up the camera, to hold the camera, to look through it, to play with it. Obviously couldn't do that yesterday.
Of course, yeah.
But the feedback, yes. I mean, the feedback, it's extraordinary, isn't it? It looks like a wonderful camera. And those headline features, you're talking about 8K video. And you think to yourself, well, why do we need 8K video? And, of course, it just opens so many doors, doesn't it? I mean, you're a filmmaker, and just the editing you can do with that, how you can crop into it, and how you can take still images out of that footage, which are still incredibly high resolution. It just changes the goalposts. It's fascinating to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, not that I want to pour cold water on it, because it is an amazing product, but I think, professionals will know this, that you have to obviously take into account, if you're going to be filming 8K RAW, then, your workflow is probably going to have to change as well. You're going to need a very well-spec'd machine to cope with the footage. So, maybe it's a case that a lot of photographers, professional photographers, will almost have to sort of change their setup to keep up with this camera, because it is such a quantum leap forward. But you're absolutely right. It's gonna absolutely change the industry, this camera. Because of the times we are living in at the moment, it was a very strange launch. I mean, usually, Terry will know this, we gets sort of shown into a swanky Soho hotel usually, plied with champagne and shown the camera ahead of time, but that just wasn't possible this time around. So that was a shame. But it was nice for the sort of general public to see it at the same time as most of the media as well. I mean, Terry got a bit of a heads up because he's very important in the industry. I didn't, unfortunately, but. Just to sort of follow on from this as well, because I think the R5 is obviously going to be a game-changing camera and, it's going to sell well. But actually, I think the one that's really going to move the most amount of units might be the R6. So this was the second camera launched yesterday by Canon. And the R6 is essentially a stripped-back R5. And shares a lot of specifications with the 1DX Mark III, actually, although the weather sealing, it should be pointed out, won't be quite as comparable. So it's got 20 megapixels, full-frame sensor, again, up to 20 frames per second burst rate. It actually has more AF points than the R5, and it has dual SD cards compared to the R5, which has one SD and one CF Express to cope with all that 8K video. Obviously, the R6 can't do 8K, but it does do 4K 60p, which for the vast majority of videographers, might well be enough. And better still, the price at launch is going to be $2,500 compared to the R5, which will be $4,200. That's a big investment for the R5, whereas the R6, is a fair deal more affordable. What's your take on the R6 and how it sort of sits against the R5?
I was very impressed with the R6. To be honest, I was quite surprised that this is being kind of presented as very much an enthusiast, a hobbyist camera. And I think that I've got a couple of issues with that. First of all, you'd have to be a fairly well-heeled hobbyist to be paying £2,500 for body-only camera that you just want to perhaps, be shooting your personal pictures with. Yeah. As an investment for a professional, I thought it was awesome. I would definitely agree with you that I think this is the one that's going to be moving. There's just so many benefits for it as well, and the price of it, I think you can't. I haven't reached the point where I think £2,500 isn't a lot of money, but if you're a working professional and you need a tool to do your job, that's an investment that is achievable and reasonable, I would say. You look at the price. I checked out before we came on the price of the 5D Mark IV. Obviously, that's £2,789, I think. Yeah. So, yeah, it's quite a bit less than that. I suppose the thing with the Mark IV, you can get a used, go somewhere like MPB and get a used version, quite a lot less than that. But even so, it's going to cost you less than a brand new 5D Mark IV. Does an incredible amount of things, and it really does. It raises lots and lots of questions. I think this whole mirrorless DSLR kind of issue is something that is obviously a lot of it's down to the individual. There are still things like battery life being so much better with a DSLR, but they are totally different beasts. And I think it's opened some really interesting doors. There is now a professional mirrorless camera from Canon. In fact, obviously two of them. That will absolutely, undisputably do a fantastic job for the professional. And definitely now they got something you can consider if you're a working photographer.
Well, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of photographers in my shoes now who are 5D4 users. The news has come out about these cameras, and now they're going to be thinking, right, do I upgrade to the R5, or do I sort of pivot sideways, as it were, into the R6? I mean, it's just nice to have that choice from Canon now, isn't it? For them to be, okay, they were late to the mirrorless party, but my word, they've really made up for that with the launch of these two cameras, and also, the four RF lenses that were also announced yesterday. We'll maybe save that for another episode, but there was a lot of glass announced yesterday as well. So a lot of professionals will now be thinking, what do I do next?
And then we won't kind of dwell on the glass too much because, as you say, we don't have the time. But a complete rethink of many aspects of photography, which is so interesting because they were smaller than normal long lenses, much higher maximum f-stop, which at one point you would have said, well, that doesn't make them usable really. But of course, the increased ISO capability of both of those cameras makes it all feasible. And yeah, this is the complete change of goalposts, I think, that we're looking at. And I think you've got to kind of step back a bit and really reassess what you want from your photography and where you're going to go with it. And the other thing I thought was interesting as well, and again, kind of looking at some of the feedback from yesterday, if you do decide to continue with the DSLR route and you're looking for a 5D Mark IV second hand, the obvious thing to think about is that there'd be a lot more coming onto the market soon. Yes. And prices could drop down because people will be trading up to, probably the R6, if not the R5. So, if you're happy to stay with the DSLR, you'll probably have a lot more second-hand options coming up in the very near future, I suggest.
Well, somebody somewhere may be getting my very well looked after 5D4 soon.
In immaculate condition, I'm sure.
Yeah, let's
only dropped a few times.
Great stuff. Well, well done. Well,
they do bounce.
Well done, Canon. That was great work with those launches. And it's also been a busy month for lens launches as well over the last few weeks. We've seen Tamron pull the covers off 28 to 200 f2.8 to 5.6, which is for Sony E-mount cameras, and coincidentally, that's just landed on my desk. So I'm looking very much forward to testing that. We've also seen Takina announce an ultra-wide 11 to 20mm optic for Canon and Nikon APS-C DSLRs, and not to be left out, Sigma has unveiled its first long telephoto zoom lens for full-frame mirrorless cameras. Well, joining me on the line now is Tim Berry, who is Media and Marketing Manager at Sigma Imaging UK, and Tim's kindly agreed to give us some time to tell us a little bit more about the Sigma 100 to 400. Tim, thanks again for joining us, and I wonder if I can start by asking you a little bit about where this lens sits in the Sigma range and what sort of photographers might be interested in it.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Matty. So as you say, it's an ultra telephoto lens, 100 to 400, aperture of f5 to f6.3, and it's a full frame lens, so designed for full frame mirrorless cameras, but it can also, of course, be used on APS-C cameras, provided it fits on them. Now, this is designed for mirrorless cameras specifically, and it fits on any E-mount camera, so any full frame Sony camera, or any L-mount camera, so that's any full frame Panasonic, the Sigma FP, or any Leica camera. Now, in the Sigma range, there's already a DSLR, lens, which is 100 to 400mm.
Sure.
But Sigma's been really keen to point out that it's not the same lens with a different mount. It's completely redesigned for mirrorless. So it's a brand new lens, new optical design, new features. And it's a very much a newly sort of conceived lens, and very sharp in the corners, even wide open, hardly any chromatic aberration. And I think it really kind of fills a gap in the market for kind of E-mount and L-mount users. And I think we kind of felt sort of this kind of big sort of sigh of relief when it came out, because a lot of these kind of users, especially L-mount users, have been kind of waiting for something like this because there just isn't anything on the market available. So it was a really kind of filled a gap. And I guess, who's it for? Well, it's an ultra telephoto lens, so probably most people are going to be picking this up for kind of wildlife, sports, aviation, kind of any kind of fast action subject really. So garden birds, wild birds, air shows, football matches, that kind of thing. But for me, I would say its USP really is that it's so small and light that it's about, I don't know, 1.1 kilograms or something, just over.
Yeah.
And that means it's really good for day-to-day shooting as well. Whereas, so, you know, most telephoto, ultra telephoto lenses are quite big and heavy, so they're kind of field lenses really. You would take them out to shoot something like some birds or something in a particular location. You set up on a tripod or a monopod, and then you just shoot for a while and then go home and just take your lens straight home. But this lens is much more versatile. You can kind of just put it in your camera bag, carry it around with you, take it to the park and shoot portraits of your kids or whatever, pop it in your bag without really thinking about it. And that just makes it a much more versatile lens and much more sort of usable for sort of day-to-day shooting. And for me, that is its USP, I think. And actually a good comparison, we did a bit of a weight test, because when you say 1.1 kilograms, people think, how heavy is that? But in real life, it's about the same as 3 cans of Coke. So it's very, very slightly heavier than 3 cans of Coke. So it's so that gives you an idea of how much it weighs, which is very little compared with kind of those other big ultra telephotos on the market.
Excellent. Well, I mean, that's really cool. And you and I actually go back a long way, and we've been on loads of shoots together. So I can safely say that, you know, you're a fantastic photographer in your own right, and, you know, you certainly know your way around a camera. So I'd be really interested to hear and push you for a couple of your personal favourite features on the lens. You know, maybe it could be the optical stabilisation or the compatibility with the USB dock. What are your personal favourites?
Ooh, good question. Well, thanks for the kind words, by the way. It's I think you're a better photographer than I am. But if I can mention a couple, actually, so I would say. So it's got lots of nice features. This is quite feature heavy, this lens. There's a sort of tripod column mount and a customizable button on the lens barrel and a focusing lock and all that kind of thing. But I think the ones that are a real game changer for me would be, so I suppose firstly, perhaps the sort of the dual action zoom that it's got on it. So it's got, most lenses you zoom by turning the zoom ring, you just kind of turn it left or right.
Sure.
But this one is designed specifically so that you can also pull the barrel in and out and zoom that way. So you can just kind of grab the lens hood and slide it in and out. It's got a really nice smooth action, and it's much quicker than turning the ring. And that can be quite useful if you're shooting fast action stuff, because you can just very quickly just go from 100mm to 400mm in like an instant almost. Whereas if you're turning the barrel, you kind of have to turn it a few times and it takes like 5 seconds. So that's a really nice little feature. Another one is that it's got 2 image stabilization modes rather than just the one. So most lenses, if they have image stabilization, just have one mode where it kind of compensates for all axes, so that it kind of cuts down on camera shake in all directions. And one of the modes on this lens does that, but the other mode is a special panning mode, so that the idea is that it cuts down on all axes except the panning axis, so that you get that nice smooth pan without sort of any of the other camera shake, any movement on other axes. So and that's sort of important, because if you're a fast action photography, probably you're going to be shooting birds, motorsport, planes, and almost all of those types of photography require panning. So it's a really nice feature to have built in. And then probably the third one, if I could mention a third one, probably
Absolutely,
would
go
be.
for it.
Yeah, thanks. It would be that it's got a very short focusing distance. So when it's fully zoomed into 400mm, it focuses at about 160 centimeters, which means you can get sort of really good sort of macro style shots with this lens. So it's very versatile. So I was shooting the other day with it, and I was shooting a butterfly in the garden, and I was getting crazy close to it. It's amazing how close you can focus. So, and you wouldn't think that you'd be able to do that with an ultra telephoto. Most of them have quite long focusing distances. So it's an amazing lens. You can use it for kind of everything really, which is brilliant.
Excellent. Well, that was actually going to be sort of secondary question about you. I know we've been in lockdown, but have you had your hands on it? And it sounds like you have, and it must be great to sort of take it out and, with its versatility, give it a spin, trying all these different subjects. Yeah,
that's right. So I went to I actually took a trip up to Yorkshire with it about a week and a half ago, and I went to there's a place on the coast, on the Yorkshire coast, called Bempton Cliffs, which is an RSPB reserve. Have you been there, Matty, before?
I don't think I have. I've shot in and around there, but I don't think I've been to that location. It sounds fantastic, though.
It's brilliant. It's these very tall cliffs, and sort of very vertical tall cliffs, and it's kind of a seabird colony. So you get puffins and gannets and all sorts of. There's about 10 different species of seabird, and there's absolutely millions of them. I mean, it's like a swarm of locusts. They're absolutely everywhere. And it's an amazing place, really. And they just, because they spend all their time at sea, and then they just come onto these cliffs to nest for about 2 months in May and June and July. And it's an amazing site, and so I took it down there to give it a test, and it's very challenging because it's very windy and these birds are just kind of moving extremely quickly. And I really wanted to test how well it kind of focuses, how quick it is, and how well it sort of locks on subjects. And very impressive. I used a Sony A7 III it was, and with that, I mean, that's got an amazing focusing system, and it kept up with that so well. It's such a good lens, it really is. So my hit rate was, I mean, your hit rate with that kind of photography is always relatively low, but it was much higher than I expected. So yeah, it was brilliant. Really, really impressed with it.
Excellent. Well, I mean, it sounds like a fantastic lens. When can our listeners get their hands on it? And have Sigma released a price point yet?
They have, yeah. So it was announced a couple of weeks ago, and but it's not going to actually be available until the 10th of July. That's a worldwide date, so we get it at the same time as everyone else. And it's going to be $899 in both L mount and E mount. So so it doesn't matter which system you use, $899. So yeah, it's really exciting. I think it will be a very popular lens for us. So if you're into your fast action, sports, wildlife, that kind of thing, then this is a definitely one to consider.
Absolutely. Well, Tim, thanks again so much for your time. If people want to find out more about this or any other Sigma lenses, where's the best place for them to go?
So we've got a website, of course, and we've got social channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. But I would say if you want to find out more about it, your best bet is to go and hear some reviews. So get onto YouTube, Google the lens. Google it. Yeah, search for the lens.
Yeah, sure.
And there's loads of reviews out there already. A few people did reviews before it even came out, so there are definitely some up there, and just listen to what they have to say, because of course they're independent and we're not, we're biased. So I would say before you buy any lens, you should go and get some independent reviews, and we're really confident that it performs superbly well. So and I think once you've heard those, I think you'll agree. So yeah.
Well, that was really cool of Tim to give us his time there. Now, Terry, we know that more and more professionals are also branching out into vlogging, so it's great to hear that brands are responding to this. And the last few weeks I've seen not one, but 2 dedicated vlogging cameras brought to market by Panasonic and Sony. So, which one should we go for first, the Sony or the Panasonic, do you think?
Let's take a look at the Panasonic, because I did have a presentation on that. Good news is I've actually got one coming in as well, which I'm going to send out to a vlogger I happen to know, who's going to go and give that a good try out in the field.
Good.
And very interesting, because very relevant, of course, to everything that's going on now. Lots of people have been vlogging and doing online things with their cameras, but clearly both Panasonic and Sony have been thinking about this quite a long time before COVID-19 ever reared its ugly head. So it's very much clear, that this is where a lot of the industry is going. And I think it's very interesting as well, because you might say, well, look, we're a magazine aimed at professional photographers. Why are we talking about vlogging, which is it's neither still photography nor a traditional thing that a photographer would do. But I would suggest, I think everybody, we as a publisher are reinventing ourselves. I think photographers need to do the same. You can't stand still. You can never stand still. We recently did a live stream with Jimmy Chang, who's obviously using Olympus cameras, but he's a photographer who's moved into vlogging. It totally raises his profile. It tells his potential customers and clients a bit about his personality. It introduces himself, and he's found it a really valuable and a useful thing to do. I don't think it's for everyone. You've got to be good in front of a camera. You've got to be very natural and relaxed. You can't be kind of static and wooden. But it's definitely something, if you feel you're up to it, it's definitely something to look at. And I think both the Panasonic and the Sony cameras are really interesting products. And they're good prices, and they're giving you so many more options than you would get from a smartphone. I mean, the Panasonic, for example, has got interchangeable lenses with it. And, sorry, I was just going to say a 20 megapixel sensor at the heart of it all, which is... so the quality from that is going to be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're two very different offerings, actually. I mean, the Panasonic interchangeable lenses, 20 megapixel sensor. The Sony has a fixed 24 to 70 lens, so that needs to be taken into account. But it also does, and this is a startling specification, it could do up to 1,000 frames per second slow motion. So, really, really slowing things down, which, for content creators opens so many creative doors. And, I'm doing some filming later today and actually tomorrow as well. And I'm sat here looking on my desk at my C100 Mark II and how big and unwieldy that camera is. And I can see the appeal of small, nimble vlogging cameras. And you're right, it's not for everybody. But, camera manufacturers don't just launch cameras for nothing. They put a lot of R&D before anything ever comes to market. So there must be a real need and demand for these cameras. And I think it's just great to see new innovative products hit the market. That can only be a good thing for the professional market. And maybe even some of these features that start off in something small like a Panasonic G100 or a Sony ZV-1 will then sort of trickle up to more professional cameras. So that's often how the camera brands work. They test the waters in the smaller cameras, and then they sort of trickle up to the larger cameras. So I think this is going to be the start of a new stream of vlogging cameras, and I think we're going to see more and more of these on the market, which I think is a good thing.
Well, yeah, you've got to have an open mind, and I've got an open mind on everything. And I mean, it's one of the reasons we've been looking in general at video in professional photo increasingly over the last sort of year to 2 years. You can't just be a traditional photographer. You can't keep your head down and not look at what's coming over the horizon. It's just expanding. It's becoming a completely different business to what it was. I'd suggest it's more kind of multimedia now. Filmmaking doesn't come into every aspect of photography, but an awful lot it does. And you can offer extra services to a client, and you can also offer a service that somebody else will offer if you don't. And I think vlogging kind of comes into that. It's certainly something that we'll cover it off. It's not going to be a huge strand of what we do, but it'll be something we do cover. And like I say, it's actually getting hold of the kit is the key to it all. And the Lumix G100, for example, one of the big things, and I should be interested to see what it can actually do, because I'm slightly cynical about it, but it has an integrated Ozo audio by Nokia sound system.
Yes.
So in other words, a really what is said to be a really good quality built-in microphone. Now, I'm of the school where I would always think you'd need an accessory microphone rather than relying on the built-in one. But we will not sit in judgment on that until we've actually had a listen to it. And I'm told by Panasonic that it's surprisingly good. So we'll see. Maybe for for a vlogger, that will be good enough. But I think I would take that with a pinch of salt until we've actually tried it out.
Cool. Well, let's move on to our first item. And the headline in our show notes says it all, really. Bouncing back after lockdown. We've talked about it already. It's been a hard time. And we know there's much more important things going on in the world than image making. But of course, a lot of people listening to this podcast will make their living in photography and videography. So we know they've been hit hard. But now things are easing in the outside world. I think it's time to look ahead and explore ways to rebuild businesses. And Terry, you're quite an expert on this, so I'm gonna hand the mic over to you on this, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Yes, I mean we've spoken, haven't we, about reinvention, and my goodness, I think ourselves and so many other people out there have had to kind of suddenly step back. I think we had about a week where I had my head in my hands just thinking, where on earth is this all going? And you're just watching everything kind of falling down around your ears. But, you know, if you're going to run a business, you've got to take a deep breath, pull yourself up and just, you know, then go back into it and just think, well, how are we going to get through this? And I mean, for us and for so many other people, it's been going online and just telling people that you're still out there, even if you can't work, even if you're a wedding photographer, for example, and all your weddings have suddenly been cancelled and there is absolutely no prospect whatsoever of anything happening for months and months.
Yeah,
You've still got to be telling the world, you know, that you're out there, and you've got to be really, you know, you've got to be just telling people you're going to be coming back. And then, you know, now we're getting to the point, I suppose, where things are slowly, you know, there's some kind of normality coming back in. We're a very long way from normal, but you've got to be thinking about, now, how do I kind of go back into this? And we are, obviously, as a magazine as well, we're doing that same thing. We're thinking, well, we can't be, you know, we probably don't want to be digital only forever. So at some point, we got to go back into print. So we're thinking about how we do that. I think there's photographers thinking about how they get their customers back, how they kind of make them aware that they're back in business. They probably need to have special offers. I think people in the last 3 months, they probably value their families maybe more now than they ever did, you know, especially if they haven't been able to see maybe the grandparents or something. So you can offer something like a family shoot, you know, when everybody can get back together, let's get an album put together where, you know, we'll have the whole family together in this album and celebrate the fact that we can do that.
That's a good tip, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the weddings that have been cancelled this year, most of them you would think they've been postponed rather than cancelled, which kind of suggests that as things start to happen again, you're going to have more weddings now that you can shake a stick at. So for those wedding photographers who are geared up to get back into it all, there should be more work than they can handle. Really, that really should be coming back with a real bounce. And and also I would suggest, I think. It's likely we're going to see a bit of a baby boom coming up as well on the back of everything. So you could have, you know, newborn photography and all these kinds of things. I think just to keep sane, you've got to try and keep optimistic and positive, and you've got to think about how you can tap into that. And you've really got to be shouting about the fact that you're still there. You've still got a lot to offer, and you know, I'm fairly optimistic about the future, and you know, and I really hope that the you know, professional photographers out there, you know, have managed to get through it and can start to build their businesses back up again.
Definitely. I mean, you know, the main takeout I got from that was, just because you're not actively shooting, don't stop telling people about your photography, about your services, because, you know, as you say, people are at home. They're going to be scrolling through their timeline on Facebook. So, you know, now's the time to really sort of ramp up your social media game and, you know, give examples of your work, link to your website so they can see even more, blog about your sort of experiences as a wedding photographer or as a newborn photographer. Just tell your story, I think, is what you're trying to say, isn't it, Terry?
Yes, it is. I mean, I've got just a very quick analogy. There's 2 pubs in my locality, one of which just completely put the shutters up, just walked away from it, let the grass grow, looked semi-derelict. The other one of which was out there selling beers off a trestle table on Saturday mornings. They were delivering groceries to local people. They were doing pub-in-a-box offerings, you know, where you could take beer away and food and things. And they were just basic. I don't think they made any money out of that. They were just saying, look, we're here. We're part of the community.
Yeah.
People don't want to lose the pub. They don't want to lose their local photographer. And it's just saying we're still here. And it's good for your mental health as well to be doing something and not just sitting. You know, these are very difficult times. And I wouldn't be surprised at anybody who feels very kind of anxious and challenged by everything. But the more you can keep yourself busy and be talking to people, definitely the better it is from every aspect.
Great stuff, great stuff. Well, look, I mean, you actually mentioned about the magazine when you were chatting about that. I think now's a good time to sort of tell people what's happening with the magazine. You mentioned about having some positive news about print title again. So do you want to run the listeners through that?
Absolutely, yes. As I say, we've been 3 issues digital only. And again, just back to what I said, we've been very, very positive about that. There's no apologies for it. It was something we had to do. We looked at the situation and we went into it. We put the pages up. We made them very interactive. They're all over 100 pages long and had really, really good feedback on them. But we are, in essence, a printed magazine. And we've always been looking for the time when we can go back into print. And the shops are open again. Smith's is up and running. So our next issue, which is 174, which is out on August the 6th, that's going to be back in the shops. That's going to be printed. So the subscribers will be getting their issues, and it will be back in the shops for people to buy. So, yeah, it's it's a positive sign again, and hopefully it's something that people will want to see and will feel like a touch of normality again to be able to pick up their issue and go through it in the normal way.
Great stuff. Now, every podcast episode, we're going to try and answer your questions and queries. And ahead of the recording this show, we put a shout out on the Professional Photo Twitter feed, which is at pro_photo-mag. And one of the replies we received was from Joanne in Swansea, who asked, I went pro 6 months ago and my family portrait business has been okay. I'm looking to build, now restrictions are easing. I'm always told about the importance of networking, but if I'm honest, I don't really know where to start. Can you help? So what advice would you give Joanne in Swansea, Terry?
Well, definitely networking is absolutely crucial. And I think it always was, but I think even more now. I think when you get challenges, and we've all had challenges recently, if you're on your own, completely on your own, nobody to share anything with, there's this thing that you can get in your head that you're the only one who's going through this, and it can get very very lonely, and you also need people to bounce ideas off and to support you, and you can support other people as well. So I think networking is absolutely crucial. Lots of different ways you can do it. I would say definitely look at the associations. The Societies of Photographers is a really good one. They've got lots and lots of things going on, and that you can talk to others who are in your situation. And I think local groups as well. If you haven't got one in your area for photographers, I know people who've actually gone out and formed one, because these people you might see them as your rivals. You might even kind of fear them a little bit. But actually, I think there's so much to be gained from talking to others who are in your business. And, if there's people you know and you trust, they can give you work that they can't take on because they're busy. You can do the other thing back for them as well. There's just so much in it. And there are other, of course, local business groups that are just local businesses, not just photographers. But again, you can learn a lot from that as well. And actually, you network with them. If they want a photographer, they know who to come to, don't they? Because they already know you through the local Chamber of Commerce.
Absolutely.
Or something.
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a strange one for me because I don't do a huge amount of networking, if I'm completely honest. I keep saying I will, but I'm fairly busy, and the work sort of comes from sort of larger brands and things like that. So I don't have to do too much running. But one point I was going to add for Joanne was that, networking doesn't have to be, and especially in this day and age, doesn't have to be meeting up in person. You can do it on Facebook groups. You can do it, as you say, through the societies, forums, things like that. It doesn't always have to be face-to-face. And, with COVID and lockdown, although it is easing, that's probably going to be the way for the near future. But Terry's absolutely right. The amount of sort of work I've had where, a fellow photographer has gone, look, I've double booked myself for that date, or I've got too much work on and I can't do that. Can you help me out? Can you take this off my hands? Is quite a great deal. So it's always worth, being friendly with other photographers, Because if you've double booked yourself and you need to give them a job, you want them to be happy about it and to do a good job for you. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the best approach. Anything else you want to add to that, Terry?
I very much agree with you with the online side of things as well. I think what you've got to do, though, you've just got to be careful that you don't kind of, if we're getting into social media and so on, can be an amazing thing. That can be also a massive time waster, in that you can kind of get yourself into conversations and discussions and things. I think you've got to be fairly hard-headed about it.
Yeah.
And you've got to kind of allocate time to it and see a use for it, but it's also just nice to talk to people sometimes, and there's plenty of room for that. If you work in an office, you will talk about just normal things just to keep sane, and if you work on your own, it's quite nice to do that sometimes. But it's just keeping a lid on it, really, so that you don't you keep it within reason. You don't use too much time up on that.
Fair enough. Well, I hope that's advice helps, Joanne. Please get back in touch with us and let us know how your networking goes, if you see a bounce in client numbers, and what else you try to network and build a business, because getting feedback from our advice is really great as well. So next question comes from Stuart in Islington, who says, let's talk video. What do I need to do to make the transition from stills? Have you got any advice for Stuart?
Well, the cameras these days are just incredible. I mean, we've just seen the two launches yesterday, and people are talking about the video potential of both those cameras almost as much as the still potential. We don't any longer just have cameras that are just to shoot still images. I think pretty much every modern camera these days, and certainly every mirrorless one, it's got everything built in it. You just they're hybrids, they're proper hybrids. So the tools are there. One of the things we've been talking about over the last 3 months, particularly with photographers, perhaps those who didn't have work on, is this whole thing about learning a new skill. And it might be redesigning your website, but one of the things you could also be doing would be to teach yourself video skills. And at the very basic level, you can move into video to a certain extent fairly easily. For example, if you're a wedding photographer, you could be shooting some video clips of things like the dances and some of the activities going on.
Sure.
You could have you could have a second shooter just putting a bit of video footage together, and you could edit that very quickly together in a small film with some music behind it, so no audio to worry about. And that's an extra little service, and that of course is using video in its most basic form. But you could charge for video services as well. If you're a still photographer and you shoot a video section of that job as well, you can charge your client more for that, and there will be investment, especially if there's audio involved. There'll be new skills to learn in terms of editing and so on, and as there's so much to filmmaking as you go further up the food chain, as you say, with sort of codecs, film rates, and all the rest of it, and it's a little bit daunting, but I think if you kind of ease yourself into it and have we talked about having an open mind and tell yourself you need these skills, it's certainly that door is open. There's a lot there. There's a lot of potential there to get into it.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I mean, I would add to that take some time to learn the basics. So understand frame rates, understand how important audio is, because a bit of dodgy video can be cleaned up. Dodgy audio is viewers just can't stand that. So you really need to sort of start learning about audio. And of course, editing. I mean, I use Adobe Premiere and After Effects. I mean, the whole sort of Adobe ecosystem, I prefer to use that rather than Final Cut Pro or any other sort of software. And it takes time to learn that to a good degree. I mean, composition is one of those skills that you can transition across if you've got a good eye for a picture. 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a good eye for lining up a scene for video. That's cool. But learning the new skills, as I say, like frame rates and audio and editing, take the time to do that. And I think once you've got those basics, you're going to be better placed to make a decision to go, look, I've learned this is something I want to pursue, Or you may turn around and go, actually, I don't like that way of working. I prefer just to do stills. But as Terry says, I mean, the more you can offer, the more you can charge. And, at the end of the day, we're professional photographers. So we need to make our living from these things. So that's the long and short of it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, just be commercially minded about it. I mean, I've known you for a long time, Matty, and I remember you're fairly typical in that you were a photographer, and I think I'm right in saying you weren't shooting video at all, and you've kind of taught yourself that side of your business.
That's right, yes.
And you were telling me, I think, how much of your business video now is. So you've included that now, and if you can imagine just taking that out of the equation entirely and saying to a client, look, I don't shoot video. I'm assuming you would probably say to me that you would probably lose quite a lot of the work that you're getting in.
Yeah, well, I don't mind mentioning it on the podcast. I think that, when I went freelance 4 years ago, it was probably around sort of 40% video, 60% photography. Now it's probably 80% video, 20% photography. So, I mean, that is, a huge leap. And I'm really lucky because I actually really enjoy the video elements as well, and there has to be an element of enjoyment because, all right, at the end of the day, it's how we make our living. But you've got to love what you do, or that passion just doesn't come across in the final product. So yeah, if you feel like you want to give it a go and it doesn't feel right, then perhaps it's not the thing for you. However, if you do give it a go and you think, why didn't I try this years ago? Then fantastic.
I've loved it. I've loved making films, and I think photographers are creative people, and you give a creative person a video button on their camera, they're not going to ignore it. They're going to, from the 5D Mark II, that was just an afterthought. And of course, all these creative people went out and just did ridiculous things with that camera that you were never meant to be able to do. And suddenly had a full-frame filmmaking camera for the cost of that camera. And it just opened all the doors. I've made films. I'm a photographer myself, although I don't get to do a lot of photography now because the magazine takes up so much time. And I have made films for clients, and I really enjoyed it. Total learning process, and I do what I think you probably need to do, which is surround yourself with people who actually do know what they're doing. So you take the job on, but you have people there, safe pairs of hands around you until you get your head around it. And I'd recommend photographers who are a bit nervous about it, to do the same thing, to have somebody along with them to kind of just show them the ropes and the first few jobs, perhaps, if they need to. But yeah, I've just invested in a second-hand Panasonic GH5, which it's a good filmmaking camera and very affordable. And I'm going to have a lot of fun with that, I think, trying that out over the next week or two.
Absolutely. And the great thing about the GH5 is how many lenses are on the market for it now and how affordable they are. So that's a great choice, Terry. Well, Stuart, thanks again for your question. Please get back in touch with us to tell us how the video work is progressing. If you have a question you'd like myself, Terry, or one of our future guests to answer, perhaps, then please tweet us at pro_photo_mag, and remember to follow us on Facebook at Professional Photo Magazine. Well, that's about it for our first ever podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. Look out for the next episode in a fortnight. And until then, Terry, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Matty.
And everybody, I hope you enjoy your photography.